Welcome to Do Object Numbers Really Matter Anymore? Hey, I'm Eric, and this is a question that I have received a lot lately, and also variants of the question that, hey, what do you do with object numbers and how do you manage object numbers and so on? And I have also in a lot of video implied that I think that object numbers will go away at some point. And I thought I'll do a video on this, and I think I'll start with talking about just a bit about the history of object numbers. So going back to version 3, Navision version 3, the character based. Haven't seen that video? There's a great video on that where I in detail go through how Navision looked 21 years ago, and it's pretty amazing how far we've come, but it's also pretty amazing what we had at that time, and it's quite interesting to see all the stuff that's are still the same. Anyway, check that video out, but in that you would also see object numbers, and object numbers were used for several things, and are still used for some of those. One, at that time we had a native database and tables were numbered. So the number was the index of a table in the database. So at that time we had object numbers. Object numbers was also the foundation of the license system. And we had you could buy a number range. So if you need to do a custom development, you need to buy a number range for those objects. That's not something that we need to do with Business Central anymore, but you still needed to do it in Nav. They made, that if you bought the report designer, you would get from 50,000 to 50,099 of reports and so on. So they kind of loosened up a bit, but back in the day, there was per object we paid. So object numbers have had a lot of impact. Object numbers has also had, and at least the license parts have had that impact that people were trying to not use too many objects because they cost a lot of money. So you would sometimes see strange reuse of tables and code units and so on, and all that is founded in the fact that object cost money, and the less object you use, the cheaper your solution will be for the customer. It's not like that anymore, but we still have the object numbers. So what impact do object numbers actually have? And I thought, let's do a video on this. Let's try to see if we can find the boundary of object numbers. Another thing that you have perhaps noticed, even if you saw one of the last videos about the Google charts, if you haven't, how about subscribing? That was what I was going to say. That would be lovely. Anyway, in that one we use the control.in, and control.in is a new object type, but it's an object type without a number. Other new object types have received a number, like enums have a number and so on, but so there is an indication that not everything needs an object number, and it's still my prediction that object numbers will go away, at least from a programming perspective. And I'll actually argue that perhaps they almost are. Anyway, let's find some code. Here is my Visual Studio Code, and I grabbed the little extension that was created for when I was playing with number series. So that was a little database. Let me log in. So we created a dude list, and apparently there's some data in this, and there's a list and a card, and that's all fine. So if we take a look at this guy, we can see that this is table 54300, and we got 4 records in it. So let's see if the table number has any impact on anything. So we'll go back to Visual Studio Code. Here is the source code for this guy, and let's make sure that our launch JSON does not have any schema update false. So whatever we do to this extension, we need to make sure that we're not introducing a breaking change. So by not having schema update mode set to force recreate, force or recreate, then we know that whatever we are doing will be considered an allowed change to the table. It's not a breaking change. So yeah, so no schema thing here. So let's do the first thing here. We will change the number of the table, and let's see, I think we have 2 tables in this, 302 and 300. So let's call this 311. How about that? That was a great Windows version. No, it wasn't, but we'll pretend. Anyway, let's try this out. Or we could do 356. How about that? Oh, we don't have the number for that. That's okay. We'll get to that in a second. So 311 it is. I hit a 5. So now your guess is as, oh, that was too late. Let's see. So, so we changed the object number of a table. We still have the data. We have not created a upgrade code unit. We have not done anything to the schema. So what's on the SQL, I was going to say SQL, but what's on the database tier, the database side of it, don't care about the object number, clearly. So what we can see here is that, yeah, a table needs an object number and has to be unique, but as long as we are within our allowance. So if I do 302 here, let me get out of the debugger and I'll try to build. I thought that the setup was 302. So that was the page. Let's find the setup. That's probably 301. Yeah. Okay, so let's go 301 and 301. Sorry, I looked the wrong place. There we go. So now I cannot have 2 objects with the same number of the same type. That's fair enough. But if you notice, when I did 356, I get that that is not an allowed number. And why it's not an allowed number, that's because in our JSON, we have told that we have an ID range. So what numbers are we allowed to use here? And by allow, I mean that we set our own rules. So I could, let's see what happens if I say from 1 till something big. How about that? That looks pretty nice. Let's save that. Okay, too many 9s. Still too many 9s. Still too many 9s. Let's see how far down we need to go. Still too many 9s. Still too many 9s. There might be a 32-bit number. Oops, don't remove a G. Let's move a 9. There we go. So at least we can do 10 million objects here. So now I compile this. It's happy. So does that mean that we can say that this should be table 1? Let's compile. We compiled. So now in our app file we have table 1. Let's deploy it. Let's deploy it. So now this is table 1. This might not work in your license. I am running a developer license, and I'm actually a bit surprised that it did work, but apparently it works. So this is table 1 because nobody ever used table 1, so now I'm going to be table 1. To be fair, that's probably a very, very bad idea, because the general concept is that from 1 to 49,999, that belongs to Microsoft. That's where Microsoft will do whatever they do. And PTE, well, that's from 50,999. What could be fun? Let's actually try that. Humor me for a second here. Let's keep the 1. And we got this as 1 here. Sorry, but let's make sure that all the other objects are still valid. Let's deploy this to the cloud. How about that? I will add a AL publish to cloud. We'll publish to an environment called book. That's the one I'm abusing right now. Let's see. We'll publish to the cloud. Okay, so now we're getting an error here behind my big head saying that your program license does not allow you to publish dude, because we gave the number 1, and number 1 is not in my license to add as a PTE table. So even though I don't really have a license file as an FLF file for the Cloud Tenant, there's still a license being applied to me, and in that license I'm not allowed to publish table 1, but I am in my local one on my dev license. So okay, so clearly that's how far we can take that little experiment. Let me get rid of this configuration again, just to avoid the question being asked, and let's go back to this guy. So the reason it failed first when I said 365 356 was that this one was probably something like, I don't know, maybe we can undo us back to that. Yeah, there we go. So I had 50 objects here, so 356 was out of my range. So what you do with the range is simply to make sure that your objects kind of stays within the same range. But let's say that you have multiple developers working on the same thing, and two of them suddenly create the same 2 different tables, and they use the same number because you go and create a new. Come on, let's see if we can create a new file here. How about test.al instead of test.a? Unless you guys want to see me do assembly language. So when you do table and you get a number, now that's the first available number. So if 2 developers are doing this at the same time, at some point when stuff has been merged and all that, you will get a deployment error, a compile error, that 2 tables have the same number. So what do? Well, you change the number of one of them, because numbers are non-significant as long as they're within the allowed range. So what we do in general is that we kind of define we define the big scope, saying that this app lives within a certain number range, but whatever, as long as you're in the number range, you're fine. And you can say that's a bit of anarchy, but in reality, it's it's fine. If two numbers clashes, then whoever is merging fixes the numbers, and then life goes on. Because it has really no impact on the finished result. It's just, at this point, it's just bookkeeping within the app. There's only one thing, and that's about to change anyway, that if we have the old-fashioned XML-based permission set, so if I do this and generate a permission set in XML, that one is referring to the object numbers. But if I were to create a permission set here, numbers, let's see, do we actually have a... So again, you can see here that even though the permission set has an ID, and if we do a T permission extension, the same thing, it has an ID, but what it refers to is an object type and an object name. So the content of the permission set is not referring to the actual objects as numbers, but by name. And that's the same thing. So when we do here, let's go back and take a look at, because this is a great example here, that here's a page and this is a list page, and the list page is referring to a cart page. But even though it would probably compile going live. Sorry, where's our list? I lost the list. It will probably compile doing this, but that's really bad. You should never do that, because then if that page do change number, this will break. Always do like this. Also, if you, let's find a piece of code somewhere. I think we have some code on the table here. So if I do a record ref, and we need to open a record ref on the customer table, for instance, we could do ref.open18, and that has been done a million times that way. But in reality, that's also bad. Well, not for a customer, because customer probably not changing. But the proper way of doing it is to do database : customer. So in this case, if we wanted the dude table, there we go. So this ref would still work if we suddenly change the name of the number of the table. So you can avoid the numbers in code. With version 18, you can avoid the numbers in permission set. Before 18, you are limited, that you need to regenerate your permission set. That's part of the extension if you choose to renumber. But again, another example, and time is running here, so I'll just tell you that in some cases where I have a PTE version and a app source version of the same app, they need different numbers, because the app source version needs to live in the 7 million series, 70 million series, and the PTE version needs to live in the PTE number range. Then it's actually just, I have a simple little routine that go in and search and replace the prefix of the numbers with a different prefix. And it's the same thing. So if you actually switch from the PTE version to the app source version, at least on Sandbox and so on, for testing, it's still the same table if it's still the same app ID though. I like it's funky. Anyway, you can change the number here, and again, if we change the number of on a page as long as we use the proper syntax and whenever using the numbers, you're good. You can go and change all you want. So I think that's a lot of words on a fairly simple, not necessarily, but a fairly narrow subject. Let me know in the comments below if this makes sense, if there's something that I clearly forgot and you're screaming at me right now. I want to know. But the big conclusion here is that I really don't spend much time on object numbers anymore, because as long as they are within the range and they are unique within the extension, it works. I never lose sleep over object numbers. I don't spend time setting up big complicated systems to synchronize object numbers between developers and so on, because if it breaks, it's a 30-second fix and then life goes on. So that's it. You guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.